Welcome back. It's been a while since I posted a video. I've been really busy. But in the meantime, a book that I read in galley form back in January has just been published in the US, and I would like to talk about it. In 2012, Anne Morgan, who kind of is a freelance writer, journalist in London, she had been doing a project where she read only female authors for a year. And then a commenter asked her what she was doing the next year. And then somehow it got around to she would try to read a book from every country in the world. And this came out to about 197 books because it was all the UN recognized countries plus Taiwan, and then I believe Kurdistan was the extra. She had a little blog contest. And so she did manage to read one book from every country or written by someone who lived in that country in the world. Some things she got specially translated for her, something like country of South Sudan, which is the newest country. They don't have a literary tradition, so somebody wrote a piece for her. And so I kind of picked up at the end of the year, so kind of in November 2012-ish. And then on the basis of her blog, Anne was asked to write a book. In the UK, it's called Reading the World, but in the US, it is called The World Between Two Covers, Reading the Globe. And this is my extremely well-thumbed galley I wrote in it. And this, contrary to what I think some people think this book will be, this is not basically a potted recreation of Anne's blog. If you want to read it, you can go to her blog. She still occasionally writes at it when she talks about the press tour for this book. It's called A Year of Readingtheworld.com, and you can read all of her thoughts about each book as she goes through her year. That's kind of what I did. After I kind of found her, I kind of went back to the beginning and then read forward. This, though, expands on a lot of her experiences in trying to find non-Anglophone literature translated into English. She said she does read a couple of languages, like, you know, but not terribly well. Some things were very easy, and then she had to decide what she would like to read, if she would like to read a very well-known book versus a not very well-known book. And then also the challenge of getting, once she identified a book, getting it legally. Making sure authors are paid for their work, or the book is paid for, and you're not just like torrenting something because you can. So this is kind of expansion on that, and she brings up a lot of really interesting points. She brings up a lot about self-publishing, and that has been helping a lot of writers in countries that don't have a very strong press or literary culture to get their work out. However, they do run into the problem of, if they're not writing in their native language, if they have to write in English, that they get dinged because their books are not edited well or their grammar is poor. And she kind of brings up the case with a Kuwaiti blogger who wrote something called The Chronicles of Dathra, where the first book she put out, people really kind of complained. She didn't really edit it or have someone edit it. And then the second book she put out, she had someone edit it for her and help her with her English. And unfortunately, I was kind of hoping to read that book because I thought it would be really interesting. That unfortunately I can't seem to find a buy link in the U.S. for the Chronicles of Dathra. But if you go out and find it, please read it. So Anne brings up a lot of really good points, and also that when you read a book from another culture, you can understand people more. And I think this is very true. This year I kind of read manga for the first time. I never had been into it. I don't always like the art style, but the merch manager I work with at the bookstore had recommended some things to me, knowing that some of the traditional like shoujo manga or something would not be appealing to me as much. He recommended some things that are more in line with literary fiction. One of them being Satoshi Kon's Opus. I didn't understand some things, but I kind of, the things that I didn't understand, or I thought that might be a cultural norm that struck me as weird, I just kind of skipped over. A lot of the time they're not necessary to kind of understand the basic premise of the plot. And if I had questions, I go back and ask. And this was also brought up kind of very recently where I was reading Cannery Row, and it was mentioned that a character was making a novena and was useful for everything else. And I'm not Catholic. I was raised Lutheran. I'm not Catholic. But I went to a friend who was Catholic, and I said, "What is making a novena?" I could Google it. I was just, for once I was too lazy to Google, so I went and asked a friend. But still, I mean, the point that the character was making a novena really wasn't necessary to plot, other than the fact that gave a reason for that side character not to be available in that scene. But it was just a detail, and I could go off, and that's with any culture. I read a book last fall called The Mathematician Shiva by Stuart Roychester. And I really apologize, Stuart Roychester, if I just totally butchered your name. Not only is The Mathematician Shiva about a mathematics professor who dies, and it's thought she has a proof to one of the Millennium Problems. It's about mathematics, pure and applied mathematics, which I don't know much about. I don't understand a lot of it. The family is also Jewish, and there are some very specific traditions that are referenced or used in this book that I don't know very much about. So I read those books, and then I was reading this review about Satoshi Kon's Opus, where they talked about, not understanding Oriental things, and it just struck me as weird that, okay, fine, if we're reading in English, like, The Mathematician Shiva is written in English, it's set in Madison, Wisconsin, and it's okay to read this, and you can skip over the bits you don't understand. But reading like non-Anglophone or from within the United States literature, like it's like you think we would think we would have to understand that culture before we got the book. And maybe that's true. Maybe you don't catch all the nuance in the book. But that doesn't mean you can't read it and try to learn something about a different culture. And somebody also said something very interesting, and I can't remember if it was on a Book Riot post, like Amanda said it, or Swapna, or Rebecca, or Preeti, but we are more than happy to read a fantasy novel with the craziest names, crazy names, but we don't want to read like a Russian novel or a Chinese or a Japanese or from Nigeria because they have a weird name character. Why is there a difference, or why is there that barrier? I don't understand it. So reading this book actually, kind of brought a lot of these things to light. I thought about things maybe I hadn't thought about them in the same way, but it was really interesting to kind of read her thought process. I'm going to recommend some books here in a second video to follow that I am reading or I have recently read that are from outside the U.S. literary tradition. If you really want, obviously everybody read this. It is great. What the original title was in its original language. So obviously it's out now in the US. It's called The World Between Two Covers. In the UK, it's Reading the World. Totally, I recommend this. Make for great beach reading. I'm not joking. And a lot of the stuff. And so really, I've been holding this book up the whole time. I was getting tired. I'm really good at this. Because I really need to get a bigger memory card.